Hello everyone! In the last tutorial we looked at intervals that were major and minor intervals, and we found out that if a major interval gets smaller, it becomes minor, and if a minor interval gets bigger, it becomes major. Now what happens to a perfect interval when it gets smaller or bigger? Well, if a perfect interval gets bigger, we call it augmented. If a perfect interval gets smaller, we call it diminished. So let's have a look at a few diminished and augmented intervals. We use the same method as before. We ignore the accidental in the interval, and after we found out which interval it is, we consider the accidental. So from C to F we find a perfect fourth. C to F, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 semitone steps equals a perfect fourth. However, if we consider the sharp in front of the F, the interval gets bigger. Therefore, this interval is an augmented fourth. The distance in an augmented fourth is 6 semitone steps. We found out that 6 semitone steps form a tritone. So we can say that a tritone is the same as an augmented fourth. Let's check out the next interval. From C to G we find a perfect fifth. The flat, however, makes the interval smaller. So the perfect fifth becomes a diminished fifth. A diminished fifth from C to G flat has also 6 semitone steps. Therefore, it's also a tritone. The tritone is an augmented fourth in this case and a diminished fifth in this case. So both the augmented fourth and the diminished fifth can be called the tritone. Both intervals are enharmonic. Let's check out the next interval. From C to C we find a perfect octave. The sharp in front of the C, however, makes the interval bigger, so we are dealing with an augmented octave. E sharp to A. We ignore the accidental. E to A is a perfect fourth. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 semitone steps. The sharp makes the interval smaller. It brings the E closer to the A. So the perfect fourth turns into a diminished fourth. E sharp to A is a diminished fourth. And now you see why it's so important to ignore the accidental first. If we don't do that, we count from E sharp to A only 1, 2, 3, 4 semitone steps. If you use your table then, you find out that it's a major third. Well, that is wrong. To avoid this mistake, use that method. Ignore the accidental first. Find out the interval by using the table and then consider the sharp or the flat. D to G sharp. Ignore the accidental. D to G is a perfect fourth. The sharp makes the interval bigger. So the perfect fourth turns into an augmented fourth, which can also be called a tritone. And now the last one. We find a C to a C flat. You see a natural here because we are using a flat in the same bar. Just to make sure we are dealing with a C natural, we put a natural here. Let's work it out. We ignore the accidentals, we get C to C. C to C is perfect unison. The flat, however, makes the interval go bigger. Hence, we are dealing with an augmented unison. So to sum it up, if an interval is perfect and it gets bigger, it becomes augmented. If an interval is perfect and gets smaller, it becomes diminished. We also found out that the tritone comes in two versions. Version 1 is the augmented fourth, version 2 is the diminished fifth. Therefore, the augmented fourth and the diminished fifth are enharmonic. And that's it for now.